RIP XDefiant. Yesterday, both Mark Rubin and the official XDefiant's Twitter account shared this post saying, "Hello XDefiant fans, I am unfortunately here today to announce that XDefiant will be shutting down. Starting today, December 3rd, 2024, new downloads and player registrations will no longer be available. We will still release our Season 3 content in the near future. The exact date is TBD, and the servers will remain active until June 3rd, 2025. For those who purchased the Ultimate Founders Pack, you'll receive a full refund. Players who made any purchases within the last 30 days will also be fully refunded. Those refunds should happen automatically within 8 weeks of today. You can find more details on our official website, XDefiant.com. A few years ago, Ubisoft and the San Francisco dev team embarked on a bold adventure to develop a new arcade shooter called XDefiant. It was, from the start, an incredible challenge. Not only were we trying to shake up the genre by removing skill-based matchmaking while bringing back a more old-school arcade shooter experience, but we were also diving into the high-risk, high-reward realm of free-to-play. And for that, I want to applaud not only the dev team, but also Ubisoft leadership for taking that chance. Free-to-play, in particular, is a long journey. Many free-to-play games take a long time to find their footing and become profitable. It's a long journey that Ubisoft and the teams working on the game were prepared to make until very recently. But unfortunately, the journey became too much to sensibly continue. I am, of course, heartbroken to have to be writing this post. Yes, this game has been a personal passion for me for years, and yes, I know that not all challenges lead to victory, but I also want to recognize all of the developers who are being affected by this closure. Each and every one of them is a real person with a real life separate from our own, and they have all put so much of their own passion into making this game, and I hope that they can be proud of what they did achieve. I know that I will always be proud and grateful to have worked with such a great team, a team that really punched above its weight class. And what they achieved is truly remarkable. The early response from players when XDefiant launched was amazing. We broke internal records for the fastest game to surpass 5 million users, and in the end, we had over 15 million players play our game. That is something to be extremely proud of, especially considering how tough this genre is. So thank you to all of the developers who put their passion into making this game. If there's one thing I hope we can all take away from this experience, it's the importance of open, honest communication between developers and players. This player-first mentality, along with respectful, non-toxic conversations between developers and players, has been one of the standout experiences that made XDefiant so special. From my very first post about XDefiant, this was the vision I wanted to champion, and I hope it leaves a positive mark on how the game industry treats its players and communities. To our players, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, I want to express my deepest gratitude for the incredible community that has grown around XDefiant. Your passion, creativity, and dedication have inspired us every step of the way. With the utmost of love and respect, Mark. Now, even though that was Mark Rubin's statements, that's not the only official statement that was made about XDefiant. Hopefully, I'm not going to absolutely butcher his name, but the CEO of Ubisoft, Yves Guillemot, also shared an internal memo about the closure of XDefiant and the future of Ubisoft. He had said, "Hello, everyone. It has been some time since I last spoke to you, and I apologize for the silence, especially as the past months have been challenging and unsettling for Ubisoft and likely for each of you." The announcement by Marie-Sophie regarding the discontinuation of XDefiant, the closure of the San Francisco and Osaka studios, and the ramp down of the Sydney production site is among the difficult decisions we've had to make. I want to take this opportunity to pay tribute to the tremendous work done by the XDefiant teams. Their goal was to challenge the best shooter on the market, but despite the intensity of their efforts, it was not enough. To everyone leaving Ubisoft, I want to express my deepest gratitude for the work you have accomplished and the contributions you have made. We will do everything possible to provide you with the best support during this transition phase. We wanted to take a firm and clear decision to enable us to concentrate our investments and forces on more profitable projects. Now, there is more to his statement, and if you want to see the full statements, I'll have links in the description below to everything. But beyond what I just read, his statement doesn't really dive more into XDefiant. However, this internal memo and this statement from Marie-Sophie kind of paints a more clear picture. She had said, "Hello all, today I wanted to share with you that we've made the difficult decision to discontinue development on XDefiant. Despite an encouraging start, the team's passionate work, and a committed fan base, we've not been able to attract and retain enough players in the long run to compete at the level we aim for in the very demanding free-to-play FPS market. As a result, the game is too far away from reaching the results required to enable further significant investment, and we are announcing that we will be sunsetting it. Again, new downloads of the game, new player registrations, and purchases will no longer be available. However, Season 3 will still launch for the game, and the servers will still be online until June 3rd, 2025. She also goes on to mention that their studios in San Francisco and Osaka will also be shutting down, and roughly 200 to 300 people will be laid off as a result of this shutdown. She goes on to say that developing games as a service experiences remains a pillar of their strategy, and that they've achieved significant successes with Rainbow Six, The Crew, and For Honor, among others. It's a highly competitive market, and they will apply the lessons learned with XDefiant to other future live titles. Now, while I do want to share my thoughts on why I think XDefiant is being shut down, it's pretty clear that they know exactly why, and those other statements from from Ubisoft CEO, as well as Marie-Sophie, I feel like paint a more clear picture as to why XDefiant was shut down, which is specifically the fact that the game is free to play and also simultaneously doesn't have enough players to sustain the game in the long term. Which is kind of surprising because a free-to-play game really shouldn't have too many issues with getting players on the game and actually playing. But as we go over my points and I share my thoughts as to why I feel like XDefiant didn't succeed and ultimately why it's being shut down, we'll get there. And we'll be able to more deeply explore why XDefiant didn't succeed the way that I feel like a lot of us wanted it to. So first and foremost, it's really hard to ignore the elephant in the room, which is Ubisoft in this case. There's been a lot of layoffs this year, a lot of projects that didn't work out, and they were even potentially going to be bought out by Tencent. Although a buyout from Tencent is currently just a rumor, but they did publicly respond to it. Overall, it is just worth mentioning though that there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on with Ubisoft, and it clearly is affecting XDefiant as well. But ultimately, I do want to shift the focus back to the actual game itself. I want to talk about XDefiant because this is a game that was being labeled the Call of Duty killer, and they even mentioned in their own memos that they were going up against Call of Duty specifically with this project, which meant that they had to be better. XDefiant was going to have to be bigger and better and bolder and more successful than Call of Duty, which is a very, very difficult task. And I will say this, I had a lot of fun playing XDefiant, and it gave me glimpses of older, simpler times on the older Call of Duty games, but it wasn't perfect by any means. And ultimately, I can point to 5 big reasons why the game was held back, at least in my opinion. The first big issue is probably one of the most talked about issues, and almost anyone who actually downloaded and played XDefiant most likely ran into this. It was the netcode issues. Ironically enough, it's currently plaguing Black Ops 6's multiplayer and Warzone as well, but it's those issues like having desync and ghost bullets where you're shooting someone, but it's not actually registering and you're not getting the damage off, you're not actually killing people. It leads to a very frustrating and overall bad gaming experience, and people just don't really enjoy that. Now, I will admit, the last couple of times I played XDefiant over the last few months, the game's netcode did get significantly better, and the game itself was feeling better, but a lot of people would argue that it took way too long for the netcode issues to get fixed, which is also a point we're going to talk about later. The second reason is that some people just simply don't like the specialist style gameplay. Now, for someone like me who actually really enjoyed specialists in Black Ops 3 and saw them as a fun and dynamic way to expand upon the existing gameplay, the existing Call of Duty formula, I enjoyed the abilities in XDefiant. I thought they were fun. They were, somewhat unique. Obviously, some of them are very similar to things that we've had in Call of Duty games, but still, it takes the base gameplay and it adds another layer on top of it. It's dynamic. I thought it was fun, and there was a ton of potential to add a bunch of new, unique, and dynamic specialists later on in the game's lifecycle because XDefiant was pulling all of this stuff from existing Ubisoft titles and existing Ubisoft games. But even though I personally really enjoy this style of gameplay, I know that there's a lot of people out there that absolutely do not enjoy it. They don't have fun with specialists, and they just want the game to be focused on gun-on-gun action. I totally get that. One way that the XDefiant team could have remedied this problem and remedied this situation for those types of players is by having some kind of mosh pit playlist where all of the specialist abilities and stuff like that would have been completely disabled and turned off. And this was something that was talked about for years before the game even fully released. It was talked about during the betas, and I think they might have even acknowledged it, but they just never actually put it in the game. Which takes me to my third point, which was over-promising features but being too slow to deliver them. And just so we're clear, I've just been kind of listing off issues, and there's no particular order for these, but I feel like this is probably one of the biggest pain points of XDefiant for sure. There was so much talk about adding new mastery camos and adding a prestige mode, adding kill cams, adding this, adding that. And ultimately, a lot of these things just never ended up happening. And it does start to become a problem when you overpromise things like this to the community and then you can't deliver on them in time. And don't get me wrong, man, I love Mark Rubin. He's so transparent and he was communicating with so many different people. And I really do feel like he wanted to listen to everyone and give everyone these amazing features that they were requesting themselves. But at some point, I feel like it was probably just too much. There were too many features that people were asking for, and they, in essence, agreed to do all these things, but they could not get them out fast enough. And ultimately, that's just kind of a bummer because people get excited for these things, they get hyped, and they can't wait to see these things come to the game, but then they ultimately never come around. And that can put a real damper on people's excitement and enjoyment of the game. The fourth thing I want to talk about is the progression system in XDefiant. I feel like it was too slow for what you would ultimately get. Whether you were just trying to level up your weapons to get attachments or even push them further and get the mastery camos in the game, it was just too slow and tedious of a process. And honestly, it was pretty strange that they had so many back and forth changes of, speeding up progression and then speeding up weapon XP and mastery camo unlocks, and then slowing it down, and then speeding it back up. It really felt like they didn't know where to have the progression system's rates at in XDefiant. And from the player's perspective, it just felt like ranking up your weapons and getting these camos was happening at too slow of a rate, even after all the adjustments that they made. And the fifth and final reason why I personally feel like XDefiant was being held back was actually the release timing of the game and also the platform that it was released on. They could have handled this situation much better, but they didn't. You guys have probably heard a lot of people, including myself, talk about the fact that XDefiant should have really been released around the time of Modern Warfare 2, because Infinity Ward was not listening to community feedback, the gameplay was slow, it was really boring in multiplayer, and that would have been the prime moments, the prime time for XDefiant to be released. They had a specific window when Call of Duty was at a really weak point, and that would have been the perfect moment for XDefiant to capitalize, but unfortunately, the game was not ready at that point, and I do think there's a pretty good chance that if XDefiant would have released in an even more unfinished state before it was finally released to the public, there's a pretty good chance that the game would have been shut down and died even faster than it just did now. But in hindsight, it just kind of sucks because that was a really good window of opportunity, and I feel like XDefiant would have had a better fighting chance if it was released around that time. On top of that as well, XDefiant did not release on PS4 or Xbox One, which has a massive market, and if the game was free to play, there could have potentially been even more people getting on the game and playing it every single day, but unfortunately, they did not release the game on last gen. XDefiant was, however, still free to play on PS5 and Xbox Series X, so that was really good. However, on PC though, the game was only available to download through Ubisoft's launcher. You could not get it through Steam, you couldn't get it through Epic, you couldn't get it anywhere else, and I feel like that was a big strategic mistake. Steam has the largest pool of the entire PC player base, and to not tap into that, especially with a free-to-play game, is just kind of insanity. And I know that I and a lot of other people relayed this information to them, and again, I don't know why they didn't decide to do this, but this could have been a pivotal moment, a pivotal decision that could have really saved this game. But yes, those are my 5 big main reasons as to why I feel like XDefiant didn't really come to fruition and why the game did not succeed. But finally, we do have to consider how competitive the gaming space is nowadays. And I'm not talking about esports or even skill-based matchmaking. I'm talking about competition amongst the devs and publishers. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, and as I'm sure you guys are aware, XDefiant was being labeled by the gaming communities as the Call of Duty killer. And with that in mind, XDefiant was always going to have a massive uphill battle going up against Call of Duty, especially because they rapidly changed pace with Modern Warfare 3 and Black Ops 6, at least specifically talking about multiplayer. And again, like I mentioned earlier, if XDefiant was released around the time of Modern Warfare 2, they would have just had a much better public perception of the game, and it would have just been a little bit easier for them, because Modern Warfare 2, Infinity Ward was not doing anything to try to improve their own situation and improve the game for the players. Meanwhile, over there at XDefiant, they were doing the exact opposite. They were listening to players, they wanted to implement features, they wanted the community to work hand in hand with the devs to make the best possible game. And even though people will joke around and say that XDefiant was never really the COD killer and that it was never really competition to Call of Duty, it clearly was, because the mission and the overall objective and goal of what XDefiant was going to offer is what really got Call of Duty to ramp up their efforts specifically towards Call of Duty multiplayer. Say what you will about Modern Warfare 3 and even potentially Black Ops 6's multiplayer, but these devs are really trying. They are listening to community feedback, they're constantly making changes. I mean, even at the time of recording this video, they just shared some massive Season 1 Reloaded patch notes before the season is even out, and I think overall we need to just acknowledge how competitive the gaming space is getting. I do personally feel like Call of Duty's recent efforts to ramp up support for multiplayer and giving us all of these patch notes, doing all these different things, I feel like this is a direct result of XDefiant's existence, and honestly, it's a massive bummer to see this game shutting down, because it felt like they were really getting Call of Duty to get things in gear and start caring about the game again. But since XDefiant is going to be shutting down next year, that competition is now gone, and I just kind of hope that as a result of this, Call of Duty games will still continue to push to be the best that they possibly can be. Because now that XDefiant is shutting down, and especially since Microsoft and Xbox own Halo and Call of Duty, they might feel like the competition is not really there and that they don't have to try as hard, or that they don't need to actually listen to the players' feedback. So yeah, XDefiant shutting down is obviously terrible for the XDefiant community and the players who want to play that game, but it could also have a really negative rippling effect on other FPS games and other games in general, especially because the legend himself, Mark Rubin, cares so much about the players and the communities. And again, massive shout out and massive thanks to Mark Rubin and all of the people who worked on XDefiant, the entire team. They did an incredible job. They tried their best and they tried to make XDefiant the best best game that they possibly could, and I do wish them all the best of luck going forward with whatever project they work on next. Again, guys, we have to keep in mind that these are actual hardworking people, and it's their job to make these games, and a lot of people who worked really hard and actually cared about this game in the community just lost their jobs too. This has also been a really unfortunate recurring theme that's been happening a lot in the last couple of years or so, of teams working really hard on projects, ultimately to have their project shut down, and then they lose their jobs, and it just sucks. And I really, really do wish them all the best going forward. And with that being said, thank you guys very much for watching. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did and you want to see some more stuff like this, make sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new. I'll see you guys later.
Outcome. Train good.